Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude. What else? Your chancellor of cheerfulness, your archbishop of Banterbury, and of course, thanks to ZVS from Twitter for this piece of beautiful artwork, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett, coming at you with another episode of Robservations, the show about something, and I am Robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. And, we've got kind of a fun show today. You know why it's a fun show? Because sometimes people send me videos and I don't even know they're there. And one of my favorite videos was obviously, of course, from Dieter Bastian in Deutschland, because he's shiny. And what I did not know was Dieter has been a busy little beaver in lockdown over there in Deutschland, and there's a few videos I'm going to be able to share over the next couple days. One is a review of Free Enterprise that I'm going to save for my 400th show. But this, ladies and gentlemen, I want to give you a little taste. You know him, you love him, you've seen him before. He's an imagination connoisseur par excellence. Our man in Deutschland, Dieter Bastian.
Greetings, Rob. To you and all our imagination connoisseurs out there, Dieter here. Since we've been in lockdown, I thought, why not do a video? Because I know you've asked yourself, hey, you German doofus, send me some super chat money, some tipping money. I need to buy wine for listener use. I know. And of course, you need TP. But I heard you've got that, so Judgment Day has been avoided. Lucky you. Wait. This is some damn shiny packaging for TP, wouldn't you say? With all that deep purple. So if you go Space Dragon, Rob, that's your TP right here. But I know you don't listen to hard rock, heavy metal. Don't let me get into that. So I know Super Chat and tipping money at the moment. Go with me, bro. You know it best. When you pre-order a hot toy figure, forget about it. Then comes the email. At this time, you have to pay up. So this is where your Super Chat and tipping money goes. To the Iron Man Mark 7 diecast. I know, Rob, you only need one Iron Man, not three. But come on, Rob. That neon, I know. You don't give a crap about that. But isn't it shiny? You know. So, and at last, since Roberto did a video tip, so I thought I'd do not the same. And you've been in business long, made a lot of friends, but you made some enemies, but I hope not one of that thinks, why don't you just die? I got it yesterday. It's a Russian movie, black comedy with a lot of blood. It's a nice packaging. Comes with a poster signed by the director. It comes out in USA, I think, April 20th. I know you always want, get me the story, get me the gist of it. No, Rob, you don't need that every time. But I'll give you the opening, okay? Young guy stands in front of a door. He's very nervous about pushing the doorbell, and behind his back, he has a hammer. Don't you know? Did you want to know more? Just go in blind. Once again, why don't you just die? So, Rob, greetings from Germany. Stay in-house, stay safe. Only go out to go shopping. And I hope we get this crisis behind us very soon. So, live long and prosper, Rob.
I just love that. And Dieter has a couple more videos coming all the way from Germany. And I got to tell you, something, at least for me, catastrophic as opposed to, well, first of all, we lost two entertainment giants, people that I've really liked. One, of course, was actor Brian Dennehy, who passed away at the age of 81. And we also lost Alan Davio, who was the cinematographer for both E.T. and Empire of the Sun, Bugsy. I met Alan Davio a number of times. The first time I met him, I want to say I was working at Warner Brothers. and Albert Brooks was making Defending Your Life when I was there, and I was in and out of that production office on a daily basis. And I met him a number of times on the lot and talked to him. He was very warm, a big guy, warm, a lot of fun to talk to. He didn't drive, by the way. And it was so much fun to talk to him, and he would tell stories, and he was just a terrific guy. He actually passed away from complications from COVID-19. And one of the great cinematographers has been lost to us. So, and somebody that I had met, he was a guy like I'd met him at parties and things, but the first time I met him was on the Warner lot. But it's the amount of people that have been losing their lives. Again, I want to emphasize that even though we're talking about the entertainment business and all the concerns for imagination connoisseurs, there are people that are no longer with us, whether it's because of COVID-19 or not. Our own moderator, Greg Smith, lost his 106-year-old grandfather this morning. His 106-year-old grandfather, our own moderator, broke his leg and went into the hospital and just went in for surgery but never woke up. So kudos to him for living a long, happy life and having a grandson like Greg Smith, because Greg is a great man. So my heart goes out to Greg and his family, obviously his sister, who I knew as well, Stephanie, and yeah. But other than that, I'll get back to the things at hand. And one of the things at hand is I have noticed, obviously you hear from me, I pre-order physical media from around the world. I don't buy nearly as much, but I try and find special editions or interesting things. And there were two sets from Germany that I had on order at Amazon Germany as soon as they were announced. One is a 5-disc Rollerball set that has a 4K restoration of the original Rollerball, which is a film I very much adore. It's one of my favorite science fiction films of the 70s. I really like it a lot. And David Cronenberg's Crash, which has never been available on physical media in Blu-ray or HD format. They did a 4K restoration of that. I had both of those on order from Germany, from Amazon Germany, because they're German releases, and because they're no longer shipping to America, my orders just went away. And I was obviously apoplectic, beside myself, and I, of course, wrote to Dieter Bastian, our man in Deutschland, and he's going to pick those up for me. And I said, hey, man, I'll pick you up, because they're not shipping anything to Germany from here either. And he gets a lot of Blu-rays, and I said, hey, quid pro quo, Clarice, quid pro quo. So, these are the travails. These are first world imagination connoisseur problems. So it's always nice to have a wide-reaching network of friends just like yourselves all over the world. So, and then Dieter reminded me, I didn't even know that these videos, he actually made 4. I didn't know they were there. So I went and downloaded them all and prepped them for the show, because I have to put them in the right format, frame rates. So thanks for all you do, Dieter. I very much appreciate that. Now today, first thing off the top, I have not weighed in. Other YouTubers have weighed in about the great Splash controversy, or maybe we'll call it Askgate, whatever you want to call it. So those of you who might not have heard, and how could you have not by now, Splash has dropped on Disney Plus. And there is a sequence in Splash when Daryl Hannah runs off into the sea and Tom Hanks watches her go. And in the original film, she's obviously bare-assed as she goes into the ocean. And she's quite lovely. Well, Disney Plus has censored this and added, I don't even know who did this or what they were thinking, but it's terrible. They CGI'd what's supposed to be her hair, or it looks like a loincloth, I don't know what it's supposed to be, over her bare ass. Straight up, just censorship on Disney Plus, which seems strange to me. But anyway, there's a great Vanity Fair piece that I wanted to share with you guys because it's hilarious. This whole thing is hilarious. On Disney Plus, not all butts are created equal. On Monday morning, Twitter lost its collective mind when YouTube host Alison Pregler tweeted that while watching Splash on Disney Plus, she noticed that Daryl Hannah's bare butt had been censored using some kind of bizarre digital hair technology. It's the kind of thing you could easily miss if you were absent-mindedly revisiting the movie while, say, emptying the dishwasher or folding clothes. As Hannah's mermaid bounds away from Tom Hanks back into the ocean, the top part of her hair bounces, while the new digital hair seems affixed to her buttocks, even after she makes contact with the water. Out of context, the sequence looks insane. And if you look more closely, you'll see that it's but one of several baffling changes made to the movie now that it lives on Disney Plus. Other scenes in this version of Splash have effectively been zoomed in as a way to prevent viewers from even glimpsing any offending body part. In one of the streaming service blurs out Hannah's butt crack, and despite these changes, the film as presented on Disney Plus has been given a PG-13 rating, even though Splash was given a PG rating when it was originally released in 1984. Fun fact, the first movie ever released with a PG-13 rating, Red Dawn, was released a few months after Splash on June 10th, 1984. If this wasn't confusing enough, a source recently told me that Splash will go through yet another rating change this week and will soon sport a TV PG rating. The Splash controversy illuminates an issue that has plagued the streaming platform since it launched last fall: the mystifying approach to what content Disney censors and why Disney Plus, which now has 50 million subscribers worldwide, presents some older titles completely unaltered, even if they contain content modernized may classify as objectionable. Others appear in their original form, but with a mild disclaimer attached. Still, more have been fully edited, as Splash Buttgate proves. So, what determines which program gets which treatment? Well, Splash's biggest sin is nudity, although Disney Plus warns it also contains some brief language and tobacco depictions. But there is actually a fair amount of nudity elsewhere on Disney Plus, including bare bottoms in Pixar's Brave, Bart's penis in the Simpsons movie, and most of Brendan Fraser's rump on display in George of the Jungle. In the Night on Bald Mountain section of Fantasia, you even see the bare breasts of some demonic ghouls, nipples and all. The key here seems to be the context of that nudity. In December, a spokesperson from Disney Plus told The Ringer that all of the content on the service would be the equivalent of PG-13 or milder, adding, "I'm pretty sure the PG-13 rating dictates no nudity in a sexual context. The nudity in Splash has a romantic angle rather than being played strictly for laughs or being part of an 80-year-old symphonic art film. So while there's still sex in this version of Splash you can watch on Disney Plus, there are no bare butts." Sex has famously made Disney Plus squeamish. That's reportedly the reason the service halted the production of a new, more grown-up Lizzie McGuire sequel series. It also apparently is why High Fidelity and the Love Simon spinoff Love Victor were both booted from Disney Plus and placed instead on the more adult-skewing Hulu. In another snip that made waves online, a casting couch gag was removed from Toy Story 2 following director John Lasseter's exit from the company amid sexual misconduct allegations. Lasseter acknowledged the allegations in a memo citing missteps in his leadership. The edit happened not long before Disney Plus launched the digital HD version of the movie in 2019 and carried through to the streaming service. But this squeamishness can't necessarily explain everything. Take 1987's Adventures in Babysitting, which, like Splash, was originally released through Disney's more mature Touchstone Pictures label and will begin appearing on the streaming platform in the US on June 1st, 2021. Disney Plus users in other regions that already have access to the movie, including Canada, have noted, and we independently confirmed, that the version that's streaming is the broadcast TV presentation of the film, which removes the F word from one of its most famous lines. Don't F with the babysitter. Don't fuck with the babysitter. But yet another Touchstone favorite, 3 Men and a Baby, is available right now unaltered on Disney Plus, Ghost Boy and all, despite the presence of a subplot featuring drug dealers and a bag full of heroin. That's the most frustrating thing about these Disney Plus edits. There's little consistency as to what is censored and what isn't. Animated Disney classics like Peter Pan, The Jungle Book, and Dumbo appear on the service in their original form, alongside disclaimers they may contain outdated cultural depictions. Some groups, including the Middle Eastern North African Arts Advocacy Coalition and American Indians in Film and Television, have argued such a disclaimer should also be attached to more recent animated fares such as Aladdin and Pocahontas. Other titles on the service, like The Adventures of Bullwhip Griffin, a marginal live-action Western from 1967, and the 1932 animated short Santa's Workshop, have reportedly been trimmed to remove offensive material. Bullwhip Griffin, like Splash, is preceded by a note that it has been edited for content. Other changes are even more head-scratching. On Disney Plus, a moment in Lilo and Stitch that originally showed Lilo climbing into a dryer was edited so that Lilo instead hides behind a pizza box in an open cabinet, presumably due to fears that children would imitate her on-screen action in real life. This alteration may lead to even more questions, as one Twitter user remarked, "Great, now it looks like she's going into an oven." But several frames from the groundbreaking animated series Gargoyles have been reinstated, returning 2 bloody frames to the series that had been removed from the original broadcast. And every Star Wars and Marvel movie, along with most of the Pirates of the Caribbean films, are available unmolested on Disney+. Amputations, beheadings, and gunshots intact. The MPAA has always been more lenient toward graphic violence, while at the same time criminalizing even the mildest sexuality, something explored in Kirby Dick's terrific 2006 documentary This Film Is Not Yet Rated. So Disney Plus is falling in line with the industry's norms. It's dumb for sure, but there's a precedent. When asked for comment, Disney Plus declined to share the specific guidelines it uses to determine what content is permissible to display on the service and how it decides what to edit and what to leave alone, leaving the process shrouded in mystery. But with new material appearing on the streaming platform every week, spotting these edits and alterations is sure to become a continual game of whack-a-mole for eagle-eyed Disney fanatics. At least it will give us something to do. I am staunchly opposed to any kind of censorship. And what I find so strange is, as we all move through life, it seems to me that one of the great crimes in my lifetime, and I've spoken about this before, has been sort of both the infantilization, the further infantilization of children, which are infants to begin with, but then also the idea that we live in this strange world where kids are supposed to be protected, and yet at the very same time you have, well, the Bart Simpson effect. I like to call it the Bart Simpson effect because he's been around now for over 30 years. Whereas kids are presented on so much of Nickelodeon programming, Disney programming, as being the all-knowing, all-seeing, whereas the adults are the idiots. And I think it's a very strange, we treat children's entertainment in a very strange way. On one hand, we can make cartoons that are basically toy commercials. We can make shows where kids are always smarter than the idiot adults in the room. Or we do things like this. You cover the idea that a mermaid, and I get it. I think Splash was specifically targeted for this because of The Little Mermaid. And I think that children, especially girls or something, are going to come to watch The Little Mermaid that haven't seen it. And the idea of a live-action mermaid and dealing with the actual physical realities of what mermaids have to deal with, changing into fish people as opposed to being humans, and how it works with our anatomy, is something that Disney just doesn't even want to deal with in a realistic fashion. And I never thought I would say this, but there's no verisimilitude if you're going to treat mermaids like that. But I just think, what are we trying to protect kids from? I mean, we live in a world where there are school shootings, and you're going to edit a film where a woman's bare ass is on the screen because, in fact, she is a woman. Like, we're all of us, no matter who you are, you're carrying around a little bit of ass with you. Everybody has one. So it just seems so strange that these kinds of, we don't want to admit, what are we supposed to be protecting children from? Literally the realities of life. I think in a way, when kids realize that this kind of censorship goes on, I don't know if that's always the best way to deal with children. Why is it that we have to feel the need to protect children from the actual realities of life? It seems very strange. And what's even stranger is when Daryl Hannah runs into the water, it's not it's not sexual. I mean, yes, there's a romantic element to Splash, but in a way, when she runs off and swims off or swims away or whatever, there's a story beat there that I think is accentuated in a way by seeing her. I mean, it's like you feel Tom Hanks's pain for what he might be losing there, and I just think that it's such a strange. We live in this strange world, and what corporations see. What's even worse to me is that now that corporate entities like this, they literally can control when does it end. You know, it's a slippery slope to me. Human beings have been alive for thousands of years. We we know what's up. We understand. I mean, we're complex, difficult creatures a lot of the time. And this idea that we want to protect children from the reality of life seems odd to me. It's so strange. I mean, I think about movies like Lassie Hallström's My Life as a Dog, which has some very funny and warm coming of age material in it that you would never see in an American film. And I just feel like, why are we being treated, and why are our children being treated like idiots? And that's the thing that I think really bothers me. Then also, what if it becomes ideological? You know, can we not protect the artistic legacy of humankind? What if suddenly, like somebody pointed out, what if they wanted to censor Luke's arm getting cut off in Empire Strikes Back? We don't want to see that. This article brings up dismemberment and things. Why would somebody choose at some point not to do that? What if one mother writes a letter into Disney and their young child sees Empire for the first time and is traumatized by seeing Luke's hand get cut off? So Disney makes the decision, oh, I think we better edit that moment out. Now, is that better or worse for children? Sometimes the kind of trauma that you can see in an entertainment setting, how about Bambi? Are we going to make a movie where the tragedy in Bambi is not, oh, can't do that anymore? Well, don't want to hurt those kids. I mean, what are we going to have, helicopter corporations now parenting our children? I just think it's strange that we have this. We cannot tolerate this kind of thing. I don't think. And everyone's like, "Oh, Rob, what does it matter?" Well, that's how it starts. What does it matter? It's just a small thing. Well, no, it's going to eventually become pervasive, and things could. You just never know. To me, it's a slippery slope. And I also think that our cultural legacy is worth preserving. And when you deal with art and art being owned by corporations, that the corporations are not interested in preserving art. They're only interested, by definition, as a corporation, they're interested in making money. That's what they do. They're publicly held. They've got shareholders they have to pay off or whatever, make sure their dividends are getting paid. And if there's the potential that Daryl Hannah's bare ass is going to cost them money, of course they're gonna cover Daryl Hannah's bare ass. But that's such short-term thinking, and it's a little frightening to me. And I just see it as a slippery slope. And I think people should complain. The squeaky wheel gets the what does the squeaky wheel get? Oil. But I think these are important matters, and I know we're in the middle of a pandemic and people are dying, so I always want to acknowledge that. But I'm just speaking from this particular subject matter. I think that our cultural history needs to be preserved because it says something about our civilization, and the story of our civilization has never been more documented than it is now. I mean, can you imagine if they had home video cameras 1,000 years ago? Can you imagine what kind of footage and things we would have had? Maybe you're live from Golgotha. It's the crucifixion, whatever. It would have been fascinating to have the kind of records that we have of our civilization for the last 2,000 years. But we are preserving the legacy of who we are through our entertainment. And I know it seems a little like, come on, Rob, but I think it's important. And, now that everything is being digitized, books are digitized, it's easier than ever to edit this material. And it can be insidious, and I think it can be done, and people wouldn't even know until it's too late. And we do have like the National Film Registry and things like that, but I think it's important that our art is preserved. Also, watching that, I watched that clip from Splash. It's hideous. And to think that filmmakers, some future generations are going to look at that movie and go, man, how did Ron Howard allow that shot to exist? Because people will long have forgotten that this edit was put in the movie. And I would hate to think that. I think Splash is a delightful movie. And now I know somebody wrote in and said there's an Australian Blu-ray of Splash, which now I'm going to have to go find. But I just find this kinds of censorship irksome. Not just the censorship itself, but what it says about us as people, and what it says about corporations, and the fact that, are they looking out for our best interests or not? I mean, they think they are, but it literally is. They're just trying to cover their own asses by covering someone else's ass. And I just think it's odd and strange and dumb. But anyway, that's kind of, before we get to our main topic, let me see what you guys have to say here. Because I really wanted to. Stubble McShave again, our boy Stubble, sent me something, and that's what I'm going to share. Starting with Calvin Bose sends in a tip and says, when people get upset about race swapping, I think I should point out, in the original novel of Shaft, John Shaft was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white guy. Could you imagine the outcry if some filmmaker decided to do, decided to do a literal version of the character? I didn't know that, Calvin. And can you imagine? I think the image of John Shaft in the world has been completely, the novel has been supplanted by the film. I didn't know that. Calvin Bose said, I recently saw an interview with Gil Gerard. He said he knew young girls were watching Buck Rogers, and he said he wanted to show women working as crew, repairing ships. And he said, don't make it a big deal, just have them there. Show diversity. I have never heard that story either, but that's exactly what I'm talking about. I love that. Thanks for pointing that out. Today, if Buck Rogers was done, they would go out of their way to show they are diverse. Hey, I'm a woman and I work on rockets. Look at me. I'm black and I work in the lab. I'm gay and I'm a doctor, instead of just being there doing your job. Oh, I agree, and we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that. Dieter Bastian is here. Greetings, Admiral Burnett. I executed email pre-order command of Rollerball and Crash 4K from Germany for you. Please check your mailbox for more information about the subject when you've got time. Over and out. First ordering officer, Dieter Shiny Bastian. Anne says, DS9 is my favorite Trek. I rewatch it once a year and twice when I get frustrated by modern Trek. Man, I would be watching that then every week. Yes, Deep Space Nine is so good, and the article I'm going to share is definitely sets up and explains that very, very well. Willow says, after watching the DS9 episode Babel, I'd like to see how, is it Babel or Babel? I think maybe it's Babel. I'd like to see how the Ferengi are going to handle a pandemic. Non-essential businesses must close. All businesses are essential. That's a good question, Willow. I don't think Quark's would ever close. I think he would at least keep the holosuites open and bring in disinfectant teams after every use. Because Quark isn't going to shut it on down. Cody Cord sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob, wondering, since I've never seen Lord of the Rings, is the spider scene scary? Because I can't handle the spider scenes in Harry Potter, and I'm wondering if I can handle it. Plus, how long is that spider scene in Lord of the Rings? Thanks. I have a fear of spiders. Well, Cordy, or Cody, did I say Cordy? Cody Cord, is it Cody Cord? Either way, first of all, I got to tell you, Shelob is one of the great spiders in all of fiction. And it's a pretty long, pretty big scene, but Shelob is a gigantic spider. And I think if you're scared of spiders, it'll make it even better. I love the scene with Shelob. Obviously, Shelob was something I was really looking forward to when we were watching Lord of the Rings. I couldn't wait to see that. And I think it was particularly well done. And you've got time. You've got like, what do you got? Like 6 hours before you get to Shelob. So you can always close your eyes, but it's really cool. If you have a fear of spiders, this scene's not gonna. I'm not gonna lie. Not gonna lie. It's not gonna be fun for you. Not gonna be fun. But I don't think that would. If you've never seen Lord of the Rings, you got to watch it because you're going to love it. Lord of the Rings is great. I guarantee you're going to love it. And I think the Shelob scene is essential. And knowing that it's coming, face your fear, Cody. Face your fear. By the way, I hate spiders. They freak me out. Christopher Morgan sends in a super chat. Hey, Rob, you sound tired. Anything we can do? Do I? I haven't got to that point yet where I'm, I don't know. I'm all right. I don't know if I sound a little tired. Maybe I do. I've just been burning the midnight oil trying to finish this, trying to finish the special features. I've got to get them in. I'm a little past my delivery deadline, but they know I'm staying in touch. So anything we can do, appreciate you, sir. Hope, just making sure you're good. Well, thank you. Take care of yourself first. Don't feel I can call you friend, but I do care. Thanks for all you do. Well, Christopher, we can call ourselves friends. Why not? I think I'm friends with all of you imagination connoisseurs. But I really appreciate the super chat, and thank you for asking. But yeah, no, I mean, we get up. It's hard. You can't sleep in this house. There's no sleeping in here. One day we're in quarantine, but Elizabeth is still going to virtual school at Arts Center, and then I'm getting up and doing John Campia's show, and I've got plenty of work. I mean, I have a lot of work. I'm busy. And although when I finish Hills Run Red, I will feel better. It'll be delivered. I mean, I've really created over the last month 3 hours of programming, that's a lot. That's a lot, creating it from scratch. Felix Leiter's here. Sends in a tip and says, "Oh, arch magi of magical mystery. I come to you in my time of need. I must say your take on Grace Kelly and Rear Window is foolproof, but I need you to solve one of life's greatest conundrums. Arwen or Padme?" Oh, I'll give you an answer to that. It's Arwen. Look, I like Padme, but, let's just say Arwen's probably going to be a lot more fun in the long run, if you know what I'm saying. I find the one odd thing about the Star Wars universe, it's very chaste. It's almost like the most anybody... I know the twins and all that, but there was no heat between those. You can't feel the heat between you and me. Dig, if you will, a picture of Padme and Anakin. No, doesn't work. I don't want to dig that picture. I'm not going to dig that picture at all. Arwen, she's more connected to the world and the universe. And I think that I would take Arwen every day and twice on Sunday, as much as I find Natalie Portman or Padme attractive. Although Padme would probably be more fun to go to Comic-Con with. Arwen will take you to a Renaissance fair and outdrink you. So, hey, I'm thinking Arwen. 200 Watt Studio sends in a super chat and says, her bare butt was to show how free she was. It's symbolic, part of his epiphany. I completely agree. I mean, I was being flippant about it earlier, but I do think that absolutely. I mean, that's the kind of thing. Whenever you see nudity on screen portrayed that way, especially in American films, there is more to it than just that. It is absolutely not. I mean, yeah, there's an element of titillation because Daryl Hannah is an incredibly beautiful woman, and she, let's face it, has a nice ass. But that scene when she's running away, it is about freedom, and it is part of his epiphany, and you're absolutely right, 200 Watt Studio. That is a fine point to make. And the editing of that scene removes all of that. It removes all of that. It also, you're looking at something going, wait, what is that? So the meaning of that shot, there's a lot of beauty there. I just think it's so odd. Our hang up, you can kill as many people as you want. I'll tell the story. When I met Paul Verhoeven, the director, a number of times. But the first time I met him was, I want to say it might have just been a party, but I want to say it was the closing night of the Seattle International Film Festival, and he brought his first English language movie. He had brought other Dutch films. He'd brought like The Fourth Man and I think he brought Spetters to the Seattle International Film Festival. And there was the after party, and no one was really talking to him. And they'd shown Flesh and Blood, and Bruno Kirby was there with his girlfriend at the time, who was Jennifer Jason Leigh. And I ended up talking to Paul Verhoeven for like an hour. And I was 17. And we had a long conversation, and we got into it. He actually got a little agitated when he was talking to me about ratings, because Flesh and Blood had a bit of a ratings issue. And he said, I don't understand. You can kill as many people as you want in any graphic fashion in an American movie, but you have any kind of sexuality in a film, and people go bananas. And I was like, I know. It's a very odd thing that we're very puritanical about the most, literally, the beginnings of human life. We can't deal with it. And it just was so strange. And talking to him about it, he got visibly frustrated by the whole thing. It was so strange to him. And of course, obviously, he later went on and ran into some ratings trouble with Basic Instinct. And anyway, it's very strange. So Anonymous says, in the late 90s, I worked at a video store near a church. The local priest came in and put me on blast about the theatrical poster with the little boy peeing against the wall with Adam Sandler. Not only that, but he chastised us about having Kevin Smith's Dogma. It's so strange to hear that, because I think that a person's beliefs, whatever you believe, should stand up to scrutiny. Your belief system should not be so fragile that if you see an image on a poster, or you see a blasphemous image, or you see something that is diametrically opposed to your belief system, that any of that threatens what you believe. It's such a strange thing. Now, I can understand, I don't think there's any reason to openly disrespect people and their beliefs. I think, however, that when it comes to satire or things like that, you have to understand that that's part of the world. That's part of the way things are. We have to be able to do that. And I think that no one, whether you want to satirize something or ridicule or whatever, nothing is beyond ridiculing. And because it helps us, I think, if anything, we have to define ourselves through whether it's humor. I don't like things that are ultimately disrespectful. I really don't like that, because I think we should be more mindful and be more respectful of people's beliefs. But on the other hand, I also think that people need to lighten up, and you have to be able to laugh at your own foibles and shortcomings, and it's tough. Now, when you're talking about a priest coming in and seeing a poster for Dogma, I can understand that, because there is a level of, I can see how it could be perceived as disrespect, but I don't know. It's a tough one. It's hard, because I love great satire and I love great comedy, but on the other hand, I also would like to see. I think we need more respect for one another. I've seen, if nothing else, I've seen respect for people, our fellow man and fellow women, fellow people on the planet, fellow human beings. There's an erosion of respect for the individual, and I think that's problematic. Stubble McShave says, if I buy a movie on streaming, can they alter it? I'm sure they probably could. Not if you've downloaded it, I don't think. They can't, I don't think we don't have the technology where they could reach into your computer and alter the movie and put it back. Maybe they do. I don't think so. But I would like to believe not. Anonymous says, yes, Kevin Smith's Dogma was on the wall too. I had a pleasant discussion with him and quietly moved him into my office, where I asked him if he'd seen either movie, to which he commented no. I asked him how he would feel if someone went into his did you I guess you haven't finished writing it. I'll save that. I'll go back to it. Mukbang. I was told that it's mukbang. Mukbang is how you pronounce it. Elizabeth looked into what mukbang means, and apparently it's the Korean word. It means when you're stuffing your face full of food, something like that. Mukbang says, what did you make of Trials and Tribulations, the DS9 episode where they cross over with the original series? Could Discovery follow suit? I loved Trials and Tribulations. I thought it was fantastic. It was so beautifully done. It was it was fantastic. I don't think, you know what they would do in Discovery? If they did something like that in Discovery, they wouldn't go back to the original footage. They would have to recreate, they would retell it, as opposed to the respect that was paid in Deep Space Nine, because their visual look doesn't make any sense with what they would do, unless they went into the future and went into like the footage from Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan or something. I don't think they could. I don't think that Discovery could follow suit. Royce Freeman sends in a super chat and says, which versions of Star Trek do you prefer? The motion picture Khan and Part 6, theatrical or director's cuts, and why do you like Part 1 more than Part 2? Well, I think, look, as a movie, I think Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan is probably head and shoulders above other films. And even better than First Contact. I think First Contact is a relatively shallow film that has sort of goofy plot points in it. And, I mean, it's fun. But Star Trek II is a resonant film that deals with getting older and mortality and obviously with Spock's death. It's just a great movie, even if it wasn't a Star Trek movie. Star Trek the Motion Picture, however, I see it as an extension, as people forget now, but when it came out, obviously everyone knows about its rush to the finish line and how it's basically an unfinished movie. It didn't have time to be refined because they lost about almost a year producing the film because of the changeover from the effects houses. Robert Abel was jettisoned and they brought in Doug Trumbull and they brought in John Dykstra to the effects. So the whole movie was rushed. They really needed another year. And in editing, they could have used, if they had edited Star Trek the Motion Picture for another 6 months, I think the movie would have been an absolute masterpiece. Because the things that they took out of the theatrical version, such as Spock crying, the things that Nimoy was upset about at the premiere, those things would have been in the film. That's why the director's cut, I think, is a much better version of the movie. The thing about Star Trek the Motion Picture is it doesn't have any of the sort of enjoyable pulpy elements. I mean, it's very serious. It's very, which I like, because in my mind, I took Star Trek seriously. I think most people, when they think about Star Trek, they think they in their minds, it is the Mugatu jumping, or it is Tribbles, or it is the Telosians, or it is the Gorn. There's an element of tongue-in-cheek, almost an element of camp to the original Star Trek. Well, let me tell you, in my mind, as a kid, there was no camp. I took Star Trek extremely seriously. So when I saw Star Trek the Motion Picture, it was like manna from heaven. I loved it. I loved how serious the movie was. It was just, I was like, this is the best. I love this. And I think that Star Trek the Motion Picture, ultimately, it is the most like the original series. And I would call, there's episodes of the original series, such as the Doomsday Machine, such as the Immunity Syndrome, and not just because there's big, giant, spacefaring things we have to deal with, but there's a relentlessness and a humorlessness. I mean, there's dark humor, like at the end of Doomsday Machine, when Kirk is waiting to be beamed aboard from the Constellation, and he's like, "Gentlemen, beam me aboard." I mean, that's one of the most suspenseful moments in Star Trek history, is when the music and the transporter pad poof exploding and Kirk waiting to be beamed aboard. I mean, even now I've seen that episode 150 times, and every time I look at that, I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, are they going to get him off? Of course they are. But those are some of my favorite kinds of Star Trek episodes. Other episodes like The Empath, these were relentlessly serious episodes, and I think Star Trek the Motion Picture reflected those. And so part of the reason I love motion picture so much is it reflected what I loved about Star Trek. And there is a lot of humor in it, mostly coming from Dr. McCoy. But and I think people forget. And Star Trek the Motion Picture has a grandiosity, and the cosmos is truly strange and vast, and in its infinite, in the infinitude of the universe, there's the cosmic nature, which you never really felt in the actual TV series, but when you got to Star Trek the Motion Picture, the cosmos truly felt cosmic, and I like that. Obviously, the director's cut of that is, I think, much better. In terms of Star Trek II, I do like the extra added director's cut material. some of the takes are different, like with Saavik, which I don't know if I like those, and I much prefer the director's cut of Star Trek VI, where Rene Auberjonois, Colonel West, is revealed as being the man who was trying to assassinate Azatbur. I think that it's just a better. It adds another layer of story to it, so I do like that better. Crosstalk sends a tip in and says, to the dictator of dialogue, the admiral of articulation, the prince of prose. Wow, those are good. Okay, alliteration aside, my tarantula will turn 25 in June. Her name is Silent Roberta. Bob, Silent Bob. Oh. Anyway, here is some dinero for some wine for you and Elizabeth. Well, take off, hosers. Wow, you have a 25-year-old tarantula. That's awesome. I'd love to watch you feed it. Make a video of you feeding Silent Roberta and send it into the channel. I'd love that. Dancing Dog sends in a tip and says, Robert, it always makes me laugh when I hear someone opposed to diversity toss out the white shaft argument. It shows how few black heroes there are for them to have to go back to the 70s to find an example. I find that quite sad. You're right. Well, let's jump into, it's 45 minutes into this show and I haven't even got to what I wanted to talk about. I can already see somebody complaining in the chat. He's 45 minutes into his show and he hasn't started talking about Deep Space Nine. Well, Stubble McShave tweeted an article out by Max Temkin that was on Medium in January 3rd of 2016. And basically, he was sending this article out in response to Willow or me talking about how I should curate seasons of Star Trek, so for newbies, they wouldn't necessarily have to watch everything, but they would have a nice curated version of how to watch a show. And this article says Star Trek Deep Space Nine in 82.5 hours. So I figured, oh, okay. Well, then I started to read this article, and it was one of the best articles or pieces I've ever read about why Deep Space Nine is so good. And I'm like, wow, this is really a nicely considered article. And I figured, okay, I'm going to just straight up share this article with the Post-Geek Singularity, and I'll read it. Maybe I'll read the whole thing. Maybe I won't read the entire thing. But here is the article by Max Temkin, and this was, again, published on Medium on January 3rd, 2016. When I was in 5th grade, my dad helped me build a homemade costume so I could go as a Borg from Star Trek for Halloween. Everyone in class asked me, "What are you?" And I said, "I'm a Borg from Star Trek." As a kid, Star Trek The Next Generation was my favorite show. But sometime between 5th grade and now, I've come to recognize that while Next Gen holds a special place in my heart, it is not the best incarnation of Star Trek. That title belongs to what writer Ronald D. Moore called Next Generation's bastard stepchild, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine is a remarkable show. It is unfairly overlooked as one of the foundational programs, like Buffy, The Sopranos, and Hill Street Blues, of our current golden age of television. DS9 introduced long serialized stories about morally ambiguous characters to network television 10 years before Battlestar Galactica, Breaking Bad, and Game of Thrones. DS9 is funny, exciting, and mysterious. It has some of the best plot twists in the history of television. It has a pleasing continuity, so that episodes build upon one another, characters make mistakes, and then they grow and learn over time. Best of all, Deep Space Nine is impeccably structured, with a beginning, middle, and end. And when Deep Space Nine ends, it ends. I want to make the case that Deep Space Nine is worth your time in 2016. Obviously, it's now 2020, but this article was written 4 years ago. And give you my list of the essential episodes to watch. But in order to understand what Deep Space Nine is all about, you have to know a little bit about Star Trek. Deep Space Nine was born out of the politics of the Next Generation writer's room, which writer Tracy Torme described as an insane asylum. Gene Roddenberry, the utopian visionary despotic lunatic creator of Star Trek, established a set of strict rules about how people would behave in the future. Roddenberry said that in the 24th century, there would be no money because futuristic technology would provide for people's material needs. There would be no smoking, no piracy, no religion, and no prejudice. After Roddenberry cast Patrick Stewart as the captain of Next Generation, a reporter joked, surely they would have cured baldness by the 24th century, and Roddenberry replied, in the 24th century, they wouldn't care. That's always how I felt about the lack of, say, when someone says, well, there's no gay characters on Star Trek. And I'm like, by that time, there'd be so many, the permutations of human sexuality would be so diverse that nobody would care either. Roddenberry also decreed that among the enlightened members of the Federation, there would be no interpersonal conflict. He banned stories in which our characters do something stupid or dangerous. The Next Generation writers hated these rules because, to put it lightly, conflict and danger are traditionally considered important components of a good story. Next Generation writer Ronald D. Moore, who would go on to write for DS9 and Battlestar Galactica, said, "It was a constant problem that we just sort of gnashed our teeth about. It never made any logical sense or any dramatic sense, and we were always bitching and moaning about it. And my personal theory was that Gene sort of started to believe in himself as more of a visionary than a writer at a certain point. He started to believe the stuff he was creating, a utopian future, and wanted the Next Generation universe to be reflective of the utopian universe, so that many people had told him he had been creating it for all these years." Here's an anecdote that I love from Next Generation writer and future DS9 showrunner Ira Stephen Bear. By the way, this is absolutely true. Ira told us the same thing when we were doing the Next Generation documentaries. Ira Bear says, "I created this planet called Risa, which was a pleasure planet. The captain was stressed out and needed a vacation. He went on this vacation, and there was a holosuite there, or a holodeck. I guess a holosuite we called it. It said, 'Face your greatest fear.' And it was like a carnival place. And he thought, oh, cool, this is going to put me in a good mood. What I need is to fight some Klingons without thinking about the repercussions of it, or go after some Romulans, or whatever it is." And he goes into this holodeck, and it was all about the captain being promoted to admiral and losing the Enterprise, and Riker being bumped up to captain of the Enterprise. Basically, though he never really hit it on the head, it's about growing old. Not to grow old, but your time of life changing, and suddenly you're not going to be the guy going off on adventures. You're going to be sitting at a desk somewhere sending people on adventures. That's his greatest fear. Then it became a whole long story that I'm not going to get into now, but it got slammed dead by Roddenberry. It was my big Gene meeting where he slammed me down with all kinds of pronouncements about what Star Trek is and is not. It was like, Picard fears nothing. If it's time for him to grow old, he'll become an admiral. He becomes an admiral. He would not think about that at all. Picard is John Wayne. Well, John Wayne had all kinds of fears and guilt and angers and bitterness in his best movies. No, John Wayne is a hero. Picard is a hero. We're not going to do this episode. Even though I guess this has happened a lot on the show in the first couple of seasons, it hadn't hit us. And that's when Gene sat there. But I love the pleasure planet. Get the captain laid. That is true. After Roddenberry passed away, NBC president Brandon Tartikoff asked Next Generation executive producer Rick Berman and showrunner Michael Piller to make a new Star Trek series, the first without Gene Roddenberry. Tartikoff said that he wanted this new show to have a classic Western format. A man and his son arrive at a frontier town on the edge of known civilization. Rick Berman started to work on the new show by grappling with what he called Roddenberry's box. Berman says, "The problem with Star Trek The Next Generation is Gene created a group of characters that he purposely chose not to allow conflict between. Starfleet officers cannot be in conflict, thus it's murderous to write these shows because there's no good drama without conflict, and the conflict has to come from outside the group. What we wanted to do was something that was almost paradoxical. Bring conflict, but not break Gene's rules. They still play paramount importance in what we're doing. We created an environment where Starfleet officers were in a location that they weren't happy about being in, and they were in a location where the people who live there weren't all that happy about them being there. We also created a situation where we had people who were members of our core group who were not Starfleet. So we have a lot of frustration and conflict." This is the central crux, by the way, of why I always tell people that people come after me and go, well, Deep Space Nine it doesn't reflect Roddenberry's future because there is conflict. And I was like, no, it's about our people from a utopian civilization. They might be from a utopian civilization where they don't have to go, there's nothing they want, they have everything they need. But that doesn't mean the rest of the universe is that way. And what happens when people from utopian civilization go out into the universe and come up against people that aren't from utopian civilizations? And what was important is to watch our Starfleet characters retain their core values and who they are in the onslaught of all of this tumult that was coming at them, whether it was through the wormhole or from other parts of the Alpha, Beta, whatever, the other parts of the Milky Way. And that's what I tell people. And I've never understood why people don't get that. And that's one of the things that I love about Deep Space Nine. It's about our Federation core team retaining their values in the face of a galactic apocalyptic conflict. And I think it absolutely reflects the Roddenberry ideals. And yet people are always coming at me going, well, Rob, it really doesn't. I'm like, what? Anyway, DS9 is essentially a Western with an ensemble cast. Writer Robert Hewitt Wolf said, "We had the country doctor, we had the barkeeper, and we had the sheriff, and we had the mayor. We had it all. It was all there. We had the common man, Miles O'Brien, the Native American, Kira." As the show begins, the militaristic Cardassians have recently ended a brutal 50-year occupation of the ancient peaceful Bajorans. Bajor has petitioned to join the Federation, a kind of futuristic UN devoted to peaceful exploration, and our heroes head to a space station outside of Bajor to oversee the process. Most of the action takes place in the station, which is a remote outpost on the edge of Federation space. This naturally lent itself to a sense of continuity. Ron Moore goes on and says, the nature of the show itself was that it's a space station that doesn't go anywhere, so the storylines tended to stick around. The Enterprise could pull up to a planet, have an episode, and keep going. With Deep Space Nine, anything that took place on the station, well, guess what? Next week you're still on the station, and Bajor isn't going anywhere, so really you had to keep playing those stories. You couldn't make a big change in Bajor's political structure in one week and ignore it the next. You had to keep it going. Perhaps most interestingly, DS9 added Ferengi characters to the main cast, money-obsessed capitalist aliens used mostly as a joke in Next Gen. Showrunner Ira Steven Behr said, "We had so many fucking heroes, it was nice to have people who were like us, scared and looking out for themselves." The Ferengi stories led to some wonderful picking apart of classic Star Trek tropes, such as this conversation between Jake, the son of Federation captain, the captain of the station, and Nog, a Ferengi. Nog, "It's my money, Jake. If you want to bid at the auction, use your own money." Jake, "I'm human. I don't have any money." "It's not my fault that your species decided to abandon currency-based economics in favor of some philosophy of self-enhancement." Jake, "Hey, watch it. There's nothing wrong with our philosophy. We work to better ourselves and the rest of humanity." Nog, "What does that mean exactly?" It means we don't need money." "Well, if you don't need money, you certainly don't need mine." Reader Evan Jacobs sees a more contemporary theme in the politics of Deep Space Nine. "To me, Deep Space Nine was largely about the Jewish diaspora. Cardassians are Nazis, Ferengis represent Jews as the world sees them, i.e. anti-Semitism, and Bajorans represent Jews as they see themselves, i.e. Israel. Perhaps I'm reading too much into this, but it always seemed that way to me. I've always read themes of Jewish history into Deep Space Nine as well. In my view, the Federation is the Catholic Church. Its post-currency society is the prohibition on usury. And the Ferengis are the space Jews. Maybe that's one of the reasons the show speaks so personally to me. All of these elements come together to make Deep Space Nine something special from the beginning. The continuity of the station meant that what happened each week mattered and had lasting consequences for the characters. The show took a darker tone than Next Generation. It became more critical of the Federation's techno-utopia and examined themes like scarcity, militarism, and religious faith. Suddenly, Star Trek had traitors, dissidents, terrorists, and the Dominion, a kind of philosophical counterpoint to the Federation designed to push our heroes to their moral limits. Ron Moore goes on to say, "I like us to be remembered as the Trek series that dared to be different. We took chances in a franchise that has every reason to play it safe and spoon-feed the same thing to the audience week after week. We challenged the characters, the audience, and the Star Trek universe itself. Sometimes we failed, sometimes spectacularly, but we never stopped trying to push the show into new directions. Eventually, producer Rick Berman and the studio just kind of threw up their hands and gave up at a certain point and started concentrating on Voyager. The madmen running Deep Space Nine in the writer's room weren't listening, and the show didn't seem to work any other way, so we did what we wanted to at a certain point." The Star Trek universe appeals to me, the author, because it is an unapologetically progressive view of technology and our human capacities. In my episode guide for Next Generation, I wrote, "Star Trek has a special place in my heart because it shows us a future where we continue to advance technology and explore without destroying ourselves or shouting over each other on Twitter all day. Star Trek is optimistic on the small issues, universal healthcare, free education, a well-funded public space program, and the big issues, peaceful post-racial utopianism, the elimination of material need. That's Next Generation. But Deep Space Nine starts to question some of the uncomfortable contradictions in Star Trek's progressivism, which I personally find to be more meaningful than believing the right things from the beginning. Consider this fable from Scott Alexander. The Emperor summons before him Bodhidharma and asks, "Master, I have been tolerant of innumerable gays, lesbians, bisexuals, asexuals, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, transgender people, and Jews. How many tolerance points have I earned for my meritorious deeds?" Bodhidharma answers, "None at all." The Emperor, somewhat put out, demands to know why not. Bodhidharma asks, Well, what do you think of gay people? The Emperor answers, what do you think I am, some kind of homophobic bigot? Of course I have nothing against gay people. And Bodhidharma answers, thus do you gain no merit by tolerating them. I love that story. How much merit do our heroes gain by peacefully seeking out new life and new civilizations if they're incapable of conflict in the first place? Is it really tolerance if the Federation only has to tolerate those who will adopt Federation ideology? Or is the Federation essentially the same as the Borg, the evil cyborgs whose catchphrase is, we will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile. What happens when our enlightened Federation heroes encounter someone intolerable, like the Dominion? A thesis of Deep Space Nine is that our political strengths, tolerance, pluralism, the whole cosmopolitan ball of wax, and our personal strengths, sensitivity, playfulness, friendships, necessarily make us weak too. Deep Space Nine challenges us to accept our own and others' flaws because to eliminate them in Next Generation's relentless drive towards self-improvement would mean losing our virtues in the process. Deep Space Nine is literally about that. That's the topic of the show. How cool is that? But it isn't any good. I think one of the worst knocks against Star Trek is that it can be extremely hokey, full of what Ronald D. Moore describes as stock characters, techno double talk, bumpy-headed aliens, thespian histrionics, and empty heroics. Moore once described a Trekkie cliche board in the Next Generation writers' room. After every pitch session, because we were taking endless amounts of writers coming into pitch, the writers would all sort of gleefully go to the cliche board, and we would log how many of the Trek cliches we heard that day. Data becomes a man. Data becomes a god. They discover a planet, and the planet is alive. When I'm trying to figure out if a piece of science fiction is good or not, I often think of this 1975 essay by legendary sci-fi novelist Ursula K. Le Guin called Science Fiction and Mrs. Brown. It's interesting that this is in this article because I talked about this very essay a while ago. I won't get into this because it's a little longer. I'm already going long. I'm going to give you the link to this anyway. Deep Space Nine is a science fiction show that can sit across from Mrs. Brown, is chock full of flawed characters with worldviews more diverse than their forehead prostheses. The setting, the technology, it's all there to tell us about these people and their relationships. This clip, a conversation between two ensemble characters talking to each other while our Federation heroes are off saving the day, is often cited as a fan favorite from the show. Now, I'm going to put this in the live chat because it is indeed one of the great moments, I think, not just in Deep Space Nine, but in Star Trek history. I love this clip, and again, I'm going to put it in the live chat so you can watch it if you don't remember it. Truly one of the great moments in Star Trek Deep Space Nine between Quark and Garrick. Or consider the scene from the pilot, where Dr. Bashir, a young Starfleet careerist, meets Major Kira, a liaison officer from the Bajoran government recently assigned to work with the Federation. Bashir, oh, this will be perfect. Real frontier medicine. Frontier medicine? Major, I had my choice of any job in the fleet. Oh, did you? I didn't want some cushy job or research grant. I wanted this. The farthest reaches of the galaxy, one of the most remote outposts available. This is where the adventure is. This is where heroes are made. Right here, in the wilderness. This wilderness is my home. Touché. Deep Space Nine even takes the time to humanize its villains. One of the most memorable is Win Adami, a detestable, lawful evil leader of Bajor's religion portrayed by Louise Fletcher, Nurse Ratched on One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. She is truly one of the least likable characters I can think of in any media. She is the Dolores Umbridge of Star Trek. I hate her. But even Win gets this conversation with Major Kira. Kira, takes a lot of courage to admit that you're wrong. And you think I lack courage? I didn't say that. But it is what you think. Those of you who were in the Resistance, you're all the same. You think you're the only ones who fought the Cardassians, that you saved Bajor single-handedly. Perhaps you forget, Major, the Cardassians arrested any Bajoran they found teaching the word of the prophets. I was in a Cardassian prison camp for 5 years, and I can remember each and every beating I suffered. And while you had your weapons to protect you, all I had was my faith and my courage. And then this goes on and on and on, this article, but it also lists all of these episodes. It's a fantastic list, and it talks about how the episodes were picked, and it's basically about half the Deep Space Nine episodes that are made. So if you're interested in Deep Space Nine, look at this article, and it's a great, if you want to go back and revisit the series, but 100 and what is it? I think it's 172 total episodes. They might seem daunting. Here's 80 episodes. Cut it in half, and you can watch Deep Space Nine and still find it very, very, very fulfilling. Now, the thing about Deep Space Nine, this article, this writer brings up so many things about the show that I've always loved. And it is very in-depth, and it is a show that addresses all of these kinds of issues. And what's really interesting is, the idea that Star Trek Discovery has, now it has, you have a gay couple in Stamets and Culber, which I'm a big fan of that. But what's interesting is that when you see the two of them standing together, brushing their teeth in the morning, that seems to be, in Star Trek Discovery, the least interesting and certainly the least science fiction way to deal with different forms of sexuality. And I really loved what they did with the Trill species. And for those of you who don't know, Jadzia Dax later, I don't want to say what later, if you've never watched Deep Space Nine, but there's a joined species called the Trill, where a humanoid has basically a space slug in their joined species. So the space slug is joined to a humanoid host, and the humanoids basically look like human beings, but these space slugs can live for many, many centuries. And so the Trill, the joined species, they take different genders. So sometimes they're women, sometimes they're men, and they live lives that way, and they take on spouses, and they have lovers from all different, they change, men and women and men. And I always thought that for me, while they didn't make it too overt, it was definitely there. And sometimes old flames that were once married, who weren't married again, will see each other, and they'll both be in, say, two female bodies. So you have the joined species, and the love that they have for one another transcends. There was no the thought of sexuality wasn't there. And I always thought that the more interesting way that you deal with human sexuality, or any kind of sexuality, especially in a science fiction show, is to show those kinds of things allegorically in a science fiction concept. The same way, if you're dealing with issues, and then somebody might throw back at me, well, we still want to see representation. And I'm like, but really, you just want to see, I guess, the casual. I never wanted to watch any moment in Star Trek where people were standing in front of a mirror brushing their teeth in the morning. Why would you even waste any screen time on a scene like that? I understand you're showing people in a domestic situation, but I hark back to the script that David Gerrold wrote for the first season of Deep Space Nine that did not get made until he made it himself as part of the fan film series Star Trek New Voyages. David Gerrold wrote a story called Blood and Fire, which was about two male characters that were together. They were a couple. Remember, this is the first season of Next Generation. He wrote for Next Generation. And they were dealing with, I guess it was Regulan bloodworms or something, which was obviously an AIDS metaphor. But this same-sex couple was dealing with this situation together, and one of them loses their lives. And it was a great way, I thought, a great way to introduce the idea that you had characters that were, in fact, gay, and it was presented as matter of fact, but it was all done within the context of a science fiction action adventure show. And I think that makes these things much more palatable, and I think it's better when you see that kind of representation. And Deep Space Nine had all different kinds of actors. I mean, the fact that Bashir obviously is East Indian or Middle Eastern descent, Sadiq Al-Fadil, who by the way, he changed his name later to Alexander Sadiq, which I always thought was, what a bummer. I always used to like seeing his name as Sadiq, his original name, but I mean, I understand it had to be more palatable. He was an actor, and he's been doing some incredible work since he's left the show. He's had a pretty good career, showing up as a great character actor. I mean, he was in Game of Thrones, and I think that that's the kind of thing that I prefer to see, because it utilizes the science fiction context to make the points it wants to make, which is always what Star Trek did best: make these points in an allegorical way, and I think that's more palatable to some people. And also the I think the inclusion, we always talk about this, the inclusion and representation that Deep Space Nine had was wonderful. The fact that you forget about Ben Sisko and Jake Sisko even being black, their characters, it's not the point. Their race is not the point. They just happen to be black. It's a characteristic. The point of that relationship was it was all about a strong father-son bond. Both of them had lost the most important woman in their life. Jake lost his mother, Sisko lost his wife, Jennifer. And they had a relationship. You had a single father and a son who had one parent, and their relationship, their dynamic over 7 years was one of the best father-son relationships maybe ever portrayed on television. And obviously, you get an episode like The Visitor that just hammered that point home. And I thought that's what Deep Space Nine did best. And I think it was just really important. And that's the way you do inclusion. You don't put a billboard around it going, look at me, I am this way, look at how woke, look at how inclusive we are. That doesn't work. You just have to show it for what it is. It's got to be matter of fact, because these are things that shouldn't have to be. They should be self-evident. They're self-evident truths. We are not white or black or yellow or red, whatever. We're part of the human race. We are one species. And the differences, whether we're short, whether we're tall, we have to start forgetting about those things. And one of the things I loved about Star Trek, at least in my mind, was that human beings we were all, like, when we would go meet another race, it was all human beings. You didn't see the Romulans going, I'm only going to go deal with human beings that looked this way. And yes, I know someone's going to throw back in my face, well, why did Shran call humans pink skins? Why didn't Shran call human beings black skins or yellow skins or red skins? Or why was it always pink? And I'm like, well, I think he probably tailored his insults to whatever human beings. In my mind, this might not be true, but if Shran had come up against, say, Sisko, he probably would have called him some kind of disparaging remark. But you couldn't do that because obviously on the show, pink skins, you can disparage white people that way. So I thought that's kind of how it worked. I understood that, but a lot of people go, well, is that a racist depiction? Doesn't he have disparaging nicknames for other people? But I'm like, there'd be a production problem, I think, if Shran talked about other racial or other ethnicities from Earth differently. He could do it because he was always dealing with Captain Archer, so it worked. But yes, I'm aware of that. But I think these are the kind of leaps that you have to make when people, again, throw me these criticisms. But what about that? How woke is that? I'm like, look, man, you also have to take into account what the story and how it is all working. So anyway, but did I already put this? I did, didn't I? Maybe I didn't. I don't remember. Now I can't remember. I'll do it again. I get off, not to get off on a rant here. Not that I would ever be Dennis Miller. I used to admire the man, though. So here it is again. But this is a great list. So here you go. Yeah, man, I love Deep Space Nine. I've always loved Deep Space Nine. I think it's the way Star Trek should be done. And I think for people that say that it moves away from Roddenberry's utopian ideals, I think that's a complete misreading of the show, because I don't think it is. I think the fact that you have that just like they said in this article, that you're on this is the real final frontier. You're on the edge of known, of what we know, and we carry our utopian perfect civilization into a situation that was all full of non-utopia. How do we deal with that? And that's what I think is really, really, really important. And that's what I think is the point of the show. Not only that, I think Deep Space Nine, as you move into it, whether you're looking at Damar, one of the Cardassian characters, where Damar goes, where Gul Dukat goes, where Quark, where Rom, where Nog, where everybody goes is very surprising. And they do have character development and things. do move in interesting directions. I mean, the fact that you have an interspecies relationship when you have Lita, who's Bajoran, hooking up with Rom, Quark's brother. That was amazing. And Rom also is a father. So you have an alien father-son character that was a counterpoint, and then Nog and Jake become friends. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on Deep Space Nine that it never gets enough credit for. At least I don't think. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah. So there you go. There you go, people. I thought this article was great. I love scouring the internet for things that I haven't read before. And thank you, by the way, to Stubble McShave for tweeting this article at me. I think it's great. Dancing Dog says, Rob, please give us your quick review of the magnificent Shaw Brothers Inframan. It makes me wonder why Hong Kong did not produce more science fiction films. I find that to be one of my favorite guilty pleasures. I'll tell you something about that. I first discovered the Shaw Brothers, or as it's called there, the Super Inframan. We knew it here in America as Inframan, and it's clearly a very thinly veiled Ultraman. Ultraman, the character from Japan, an Ultraman knockoff, where a human being, because of our super science, becomes Inframan. And I found out about it because there was a Guilty Pleasures episode of Siskel and Ebert's sneak previews before it became at the movies, and Roger Ebert picked Inframan as one of his guilty pleasures. And I couldn't see this movie for the longest time. We have a one sheet, or an original American one sheet, hanging up in the house. I love Inframan. I mean, yes, the main character, if you watch the English language dub, her name is Princess Dragon Mom. I kid you not. Princess Dragon Mom. Yes, indeed. And it's a Japanese superhero fighting a Hong Kong superhero, Chinese superhero fighting Chinese giant monsters and small monsters and Princess Dragon Mom. And I think it's utterly bonkers and delightful. And again, it's got great miniature work, and it's just so much fun. I think it's hard for me to recommend the Super Inframan now. There's a beautiful Blu-ray of it, by the way. And I think, did 88 Films put it out? I'm not quite sure. I don't remember. I have a couple of different versions of it. But I think that it's just a great, fun film. And Dancing Dog, I just love it. I don't know why there wasn't more of these things. I think because you can tell that this is obviously it's a knockoff of a Japanese film. And I don't know how far they could have taken that. But it's a bummer. Dancing Dog says, let's face it, the original Star Trek was extremely diverse. Granted, because it was produced in the late 1960s, the lead would be a white actor. However, the original number one is a woman. Roddenberry was quite the forward thinker. You know, one of the things about the original Star Trek that I think is a valid criticism, look, Star Trek was made in America. And ultimately, the idea of the Camelot spirit of the Kennedy White House of the early 60s definitely sort of informed what Star Trek was. And when Azit Burr says Homo sapiens only club in Star Trek 6, I don't think she's wrong. I think the reason why also Star Trek had traditionally never traveled into foreign territories. I mean, it was big in the UK, it was big in Germany, but Star Trek didn't really travel internationally well, is because it is a uniquely sort of American view of how things should be. And I do think that Deep Space Nine is more inclusive, not just in terms of the kinds of people and situations, but also the philosophy is more global in its approach. And I think that was something that Deep Space Nine had going on for it that other shows didn't. But yeah, I mean, I think Roddenberry at the time, and the thing that people forget is, look, in the mid-'60s, it was really hard to do what Roddenberry was doing and get away with it. Network censors, we were still dealing with a very shifting political and social landscape in the United States. So Star Trek got away with a hell of a lot, the original series. And people are like, Rob, what about all the sexism? I'm like, look, it was still the 1960s. If you see how many women in Star Trek, when they had guest stars that are captains of ships, that are lawyers, that are scientists, there are a number of look at this. Yeah, they're portrayed as being beautiful and buxom, and they've got great costumes and all that. And they're very sexy, but that was TV at the time. And if you look at how much they actually did get away with, they made great strides in how people were portrayed. All kinds of people were portrayed on television at the time. Now, of course, looking back at it, we can say like, yeah, but all the girls were wearing miniskirts. Well, okay, that's true, but they still were making television in the 1960s, and unless you contextualize a little bit of it, you're of course, looking back at it now, you're going to be like, it wasn't as progressive as everyone says it is, because look at the way, okay, but this was also, it was made 54 years ago, so what are you going to do? Captain Spire sent in a super chat and said, I just watched the 2-part Maquis, where Sisko stated, out there is no paradise. I think this was Sisko's turning point to extreme measures. Well, I think, you know what, that could be. But I think when you're dealing with a conflict that was as large in scale as the Dominion War actually was, and how many people were losing their lives, I mean, it's interesting how quickly you see our politicians suggesting that 1 or 2 or 3% of our population is acceptable losses when it comes to our economy. You're seeing people literally, there are news pundits, mostly on Fox, saying things like that, and our politicians are actually insinuating that, you know what, in order to save the American economy, yeah, we could stand to lose a certain percentage of our population. I mean, it reminds me of listening to the generals talk about how much could the United States, I'm not saying we won't get our feathers mussed or whatever George C. Scott says in Dr. Strangelove, but the idea that there's an acceptable level of loss that people are, within a month or two, we have people in America now saying that, yeah, we could stand to lose a bit of our population in order to open the economy. And I would say, wow, that was quick. Look at how quick it took. Look at how fast it went. So you might be right about that, Captain. But I think that even in the episode in the Pale Moonlight, I think that Sisko's actions, he was forced into actions he had to take in order to save millions, if not billions, of people. Branding. I wasn't going to talk about this today, actually. Brandon Krause sent in a super chat and said, I just watched the Devs finale. Garland truly made something beautiful that will stand the test of time. I agree. I don't know if Elizabeth is watching this, but before I went to bed last night, before I fell asleep, I watched the Devs finale because I could not wait. I could have worked for another hour. I didn't. I had to run in. I'm like, it's 12 o'clock. Devs, the last episode is on Hulu right now. I have to go in. And I did, in fact, watch it. And I would say that, yes, indeed, Devs stuck the landing. It was different. It was like you said, it was much more beautiful than I thought. I thought it was going to be a different kind of an ending. But I think you summing it up by saying it's something beautiful that will stand the test of time. I would say that if you haven't watched Devs yet, it's an FX show that is on Hulu. It is I still maintain that one of my favorite televised pieces of science fiction is the 3rd season of Torchwood, Children of Earth. It's 5 episodes long. That I was knocked out by Children of Earth. I had never watched Torchwood before that. It was the first Torchwood. I'd seen Captain Jack on Doctor Who, but I had not watched Torchwood. So, and it's funny, after I went back and finally watched Torchwood, I found it a little disappointing the first 2 seasons because it was so wildly divergent in tone from episode to episode. But this is right up there. I would say that Devs, it's 8 episodes long and it's over and done. I mean, they could probably make another season, but I don't know why. The story is over. The story's over. And I thought they stuck the landing, and I totally agree with you. Alex Isidoro sends in a super chat and says, hey, Rob, did you hear that J.J. Abrams is loosely adapting The Shining into a series called The Overlook for HBO Max? Okay, maybe it'll be an anthology series. I don't know. Another mystery box show. Look, I love The Shining. I think The Shining, the book is great. The miniseries, I like the film, and Dr. Sleep's great. So I don't know. I guess, I mean, I'll tune in and check it out. I'll check it out. Mark C sends in a super chat and says, if you want real inclusion, look no further than 1980s G.I. Joe, a real American hero. Men, women, blacks, Asian Americans, etc. Nobody was called out for what they looked like, all just good characters. That's actually a great example. That's a fine example, Mark C. I totally agree with you. You're absolutely right about that. Yep. Joshua Levesque sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, thanks for telling me your Devs Episode 8 prediction. I'm loving the series as well. However, I'm not fond of Lily Chan, but the rest of the series makes up for it. How high would you rate Devs among other sci-fi TV series if 8 sticks the landing? I would say I would give Devs an 8.5. I want to give it 10, like 10 out of 10, but I felt like the story that it was telling only went to a certain place. And I was expecting it to have a much, much more, I guess, thoughtful existential ending than it did. It's not to say I didn't like the direction they took it in, because I did. It was, I mean, you don't know where it's going to. Halfway into the episode, you're like, oh my God, where is this going to go? And I thought it did stick the landing, and I think it was quite beautiful, to be honest. So I'll give it an 8.5, maybe a 9. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, I thought the solution for Nana Visitor being pregnant was creative in a very sci-fi way. In any other show, she would have been written out of the show, or the character would take a long trip and come back a year later. I agree. I thought they did a great job incorporating that into the show, and that's because it had deft writers. Nick Parrish sends in a tip and says, good day to you, Rob. So I was browsing through my comics and remembered another one of my 5 favorite comic book characters of all time is sitting in the penalty box thanks to its film treatment. That's the world's greatest detective, the Spirit. The Spirit is a great character. And yeah, Frank Miller's version, the film version, just not good. It just shows you that not everybody can make movies. Not everybody knows how to direct film. And the Spirit's a great character, and it's been around for a long time. So good. I mean, that's why they have the Eisner Awards at San Diego. Claudius is here. Claudius sends in a tip and says, bonjour, Rob. Bonjour, Rob. A Wrath of Khan moment. He tasks me, and I shall have him. I'll chase him round the moons of Nibia and round the Antares maelstrom and round perdition's flames before I give him up. I love that. Prepare to alter course. Yes, I love Ricardo Montalban in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. But you know what? I also loved him in Space Seed. I think he's one of the great antagonists of Star Trek. Not just because of Wrath of Khan, but mostly because of Space Seed. I already loved him. Nick says, Rob, as a comic book fan, I have the highest respect for Frank Miller, but sadly the Spirit film adaptation was below passing. So between Jonah Hex and the Spirit, which movie do you think is more likely to be redone and healed my deep wounds? You know what? I would have to give the edge to the Spirit, because so few people saw the original Spirit, and depending on like, I don't know if you guys have watched, but there is Perry Mason. Was it Perry Mason? They just dropped a trailer for on HBO for a new, let me see if I can find it. Is it Perry Mason? I think it's Perry Mason. There is a new trailer for an HBO series on HBO, and it's amazing. And here's the article about it. And there's a link to the trailer. I thought the trailer looked great. And if they can do that, if they can bring back Perry Mason like this, I was thinking, do the Spirit this way. Here, I'm going to put it. If you haven't seen this trailer, it's really good. Check it out. I'm putting it in the live chat. Watch that. It's really, really good. A noir Perry Mason show. Wow. I think the Spirit should be a streaming series. I think it absolutely should. I think it could be pretty great. Yeah, I think it could be. I think it would get made before Jonah Hex, unfortunately. Zachary King sends a tip and says, Rob, I believe Valerian was mentioned in one of yesterday's Super Chats. What is your opinion of Valerian? I don't think I've ever seen something so impressive in terms of its visuals. I'm a big fan of Luc Besson's work. Well, I have to tell you, Valerian, which is of course based on a French comic book, I think is an incredible movie that is horribly miscast. You've got Dane DeHaan and you've got Avril Lavigne, right? Or no, not Avril Lavigne. Carla Delevingne. Carla Delevingne, the model, actress model. And they look like they're high school students. And they don't look like the characters in the comics. Luc Besson is such a fan of that comic. Laureline and what's his face, the original comic. And I looked at that movie and I'm like, they needed to cast actors that looked 20 years older. I do like the movie. I just think it's horribly miscast and it's very difficult to watch. The visuals are stunning. And, they really thought they had lightning in a bottle with this movie and that it was going to make a ton of money. And it didn't. And I like watching it, though. I think there's a lot of great stuff in it. But maybe one of the most horribly miscast movies of all time. And Carla Delevingne, is it Delevingne? Delevingne, Carla. She's in Carnival Row, and I thought she was great in that. I really liked her in that. But not Valerian. Yeah, it was a bummer. What a bummer. Bummer. Dancing Dog says, Robert, I can go back further than Mark C. and G.I. Joe by stating that if you want real diversity, check out Sesame Street. Well, you're absolutely right about that. I believe Sesame Street was created back in '68 on the Children's Television Network. Yes, and I think you're absolutely right about that. That's a very astute observation, and I think that was part of why it was created in the first place. Definitely so. That's a very good point, Dancing Dog. Corey O sends in a tip and says, hey, Rob, I'm someone who grew up watching old reruns of the original series with my dad, and I've always been a casual Star Trek fan. I enjoyed but didn't love the JJ movies and had never seen any of the other shows or spin-offs, including TNG. So when Picard, obviously you're continuing that thought. While you do that, let me jump over to a letter. John D. writes in and says, I don't think you read my last letter. I'm sure it got lost in the deluge of correspondence you get every day. I'll try again. I was watching recently when you were on the John Campea show, and I immediately saw behind you in the Robservatory the object of my desire. I immediately jumped up and shouted aloud. My wife had no idea what was up. I said, look, there she is. Now, do you see it? She hadn't caught on yet. I said, look behind Rob on his shelf. And then she saw it, the 4K UHD Skywalker Saga. The very set I've been pestering her about for months on end, and I've been drooling over that box set ever since rumors of it being released started to circulate. But being a teacher, we really couldn't justify it. Sad, but true. Could you help me out and just say it's nowhere near as good as I think, even though I know it is? If you ever get tired of it resting safely on your shelf, you could always ship it to me, your favorite teacher or letter writer. Laugh out loud. Keep up the great work. Well, yes. It's right there within arm's length. I have to say, to be honest, and I know, you're going to be looking at me because I know how much you want it. I haven't taken it inside. When I picked it up, it was at Best Buy, and you had to roll up. You called them, you rolled up, and then they put it like in your. It was the first place I went to where it was curbside service because it was after we were locked down. And when I got it, I walked directly here. I came in the Robservatory, a.k.a. the garage, and I put this, I unwrapped it and looked inside and everything to see what the book was like and just put it up there. I have not taken this in the house. I have not played one of these discs. And I know you're like, what? All of my free time has been spent either being on YouTube or making Hills Run Red special features. And that's it. Or watching the movies that we're watching for Elizaviews. And everything else has been here. I can't wait. Starting this weekend, I'm going to delve in and check out the discs. And I want to hear all the soundtracks. And I want to look into all of that. So I haven't even looked. I know. I'm sorry. But I would say this. If you want it, I get it that money is tight and everything that you purchase should be something that you really, really want. But it is 9 movies and a bunch of special features. I mean, the if you break it down dollar for dollar, it's a pretty good entertainment value. So and if you put aside, I don't know, $10 a week, $20 a week or something, it would only take you however many weeks to get it or something like that. If it's Best Buy, you could get a Best Buy credit card or something and put it on that and just slowly pay it off. I don't think you should go without this. Because it sounds to me like if you're jumping up because you'd recognize it on the shelf, man, well then, I think you should have it, John. I think your wife, I think she would understand. So let me go back to Corey's tip and says, "Hey, Rob, so I'm someone who grew up watching old reruns of the original series with my dad, and I've always been a casual Star Trek fan. I enjoyed but didn't love the JJ movies, and I'd never seen any of the other shows or spin-offs, including The Next Generation. So when Picard came on, I decided to check it out. It was enjoyable, but I was greatly disappointed by the season finale. So with the quarantine going on, I decided I'd start TNG and go through some of the shows. I just started season 2, and I'm so hooked. I love me some Riker." Oh, Corey, you're not even there yet. Season 1 and 2 of Next Generation are nothing compared to what happens in season 3. And I'll give you a quick backstory. So, season 1, there was a lot of creative tumult in the first season of Star Trek. David Gerrold and Dorothy Fontana, who were instrumental in the original Star Trek series, came on board and then left because they didn't like the direction, and there was a lot of infighting, and mostly it was because of Gene Roddenberry's lawyer, Leonard Maizlish, who was exerting too much power and authority and was really pissing people off. And eventually he was actually tossed off the lot. He got in trouble with the Writers Guild, and David Gerrold and Dorothy Fontana left the series because of that as well. And then the second season of Next Generation was suffering. The writers' strike hit Star Trek hard, as it did with other shows back in 1988. So Star Trek, the second season, and Next Gen, the first season has I think 6 really good episodes. I think they're good. Episodes like Heart of Glory. I think you go back and you watch Heart of Glory. The Klingons in that are great. Vaughn Armstrong, who later played Admiral Forrest in Enterprise, plays the first Klingon that you meet aside from Worf. I think Heart of Glory is great. I'm always defending 11001001. The Binar episode I think is really good. Of course, the Big Goodbye is very good. I like Coming of Age. Not great. I even like the episode Haven, to be honest. Is it a great episode? No, but for the first season of Next Generation, I think it's a respectable episode. And I like Where No One Has Gone Before with the Traveler and Kaczynski. And again, not a perfect episode, but definitely an enjoyable episode of Star Trek, I think. So I don't think the first season's a complete disaster. And season 2, I mean, you've got, of course, you've got episodes like Q-Who, which I think is really, really good. And the Contagion introduces the Iconian gateways, and it's not perfect, but there's some interesting stuff. But when you get to season 3, what happened was the big change in season 3. The big change was is that Michael Piller came on board, and what they decided to do is Michael Piller said instead of things coming from the outside and we're dealing with external threats, all of the storyline should focus on our people first. So it was a very interesting way to approach it, and so it became much more character-based, and the stories became much more, I think, interesting. But wait till you get to season 3. Season 3 of The Next Generation takes it up a notch. Maybe not the first episode of season 3, but by the time you get to Who Watches the Watchers, we're off to the races. So you're in for a treat. And if you don't know anything about Next Generation, you have no idea how it ends, don't read anything about it. Just watch season 3 and just let it unfold before you, because, man, there's some great Star Trek episodes in season 3. Dancing Dog sends in a tip and says, "Robert, another guilty pleasure of mine is the film Priest with Paul Bettany. I thought it was well cast and well made." Yeah, I love Paul Bettany. Yeah, I mean, anything he's in, he classes up the joint. I was so happy when he was cast as Vision. I think you're right. And you go on and you say, "Robert, I realize you're not a big fan of the Orville." No, I like the Orville. But for me, it's Star Trek. I tried to watch Discovery and Picard Star Trek, and although I don't think they're total garbage, they aren't Star Trek to me. However, the Orville is enjoyable. I like the Orville. I like all the characters. I don't have a problem with it. I think, though, I really wish that it wasn't so much of a love letter to Next Generation. and it had a little bit more of its own identity. I think it probably will as it goes into the third season, but I find the Orville very enjoyable. I really do. I really do. Stubble McShave says supposedly the author of the DS9 article had made a previous list of 40 Next Generation episodes that gave a comprehensive view of TNG. He couldn't get DS9 down to less than 80 essential episodes. I love that. Stubble, thanks for passing that letter along, or the article along. I thought that was I thought that was great. I thought it was really, really great. So, yes, sir. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have work. I have work I have to do. So I'm going to end this episode number 393 of Robservations. I will be back on the John Campea show tomorrow. I'll be doing this show tomorrow. Obviously, Elizabeth and I will be doing our Friday night Eliza Views. I am whining about the movies. By the way, last night's episode was a rollicking good time where we did, of course, Russ Meyer's famous Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. It was very funny. A very funny episode. So that's where I will be tomorrow. And I want to, once again, thanks for all the support. Thanks for all the letters. Send in those letters. I can use them. Dieter Bastian, I want to thank Dieter for sending in videos, and they're hilarious. So, and I'll play one tomorrow as well. If you want to send in videos, you can do that. And I think he's just great. Shiny Rob. He and I definitely park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay, and we also, I think, have the same sense of humor. And I didn't realize that Dieter collected Hot Toys, and he does have that Tron Iron Man armor, which I missed out on. I'll have to get that on the secondary market, even though it's gone up in value. Nice collection. And those Iron Man armors, those die-cast armors, and even though I know I've said Dieter was referring to the fact, I just got a thing that says, that there's something hinky going on with the stream. But I have said that my action figure philosophy is to have the best version of a character. I might have, 6 different Iron Man armors. Those die-cast armors are a little difficult to pass up. And I am going to buy that even though I have the first die-cast Iron Patriot, I'm going to buy that new Iron Patriot. Maybe I'll sell the other Iron Patriot, or maybe I'll make a display. Who knows? But thanks for the video, Dieter. And I want to thank everybody, obviously, for their support. I want to thank my moderating staff. Mike Bodden will be coming back. He's just been dealing with crazy issues. They had a blizzard today. So he's been doing crazy issues, crazy things he has to deal with as a mayor. And I want to thank, of course, Detective Jim Boyers, who, by the way, apparently his wife Heidi, who we didn't know about. Heidi was chatting last night. So thank you, Heidi. Thanks, Jim. What a delightful wife you seem to have. And she's right. She's going to make sure Jim gets his passport. And then, of course, the great Greg Smith. Greg Smith's 106-year-old grandfather did pass away last night. But what an amazing life to have lived. He was born in 1913. That's crazy. And then, of course, I want to thank both Louis Yu and Jordy Lyons for their moderating as well. They make this community what it is. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bring an end to Robservations episode number 393. It's great to be here with you. And look, I'm getting this YouTube's being crazy. So remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to everybody out there, thanks for being here. It's great to spend these times with you, as crazy as they are. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a better day. And I mean that.